Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvase Shashunyavadi Paschatchade Shatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 17, Verse 21. Sutta Uvacha Evam Dharme Pravadati Sasamra Dvija Sattama Samahitena Manasa Vikeda Paryachastatam. Translation. Sutta Goswami said, O best among the Brahmanas, the Emperor Parikshit, thus hearing the personality of religion speak, was fully satisfied, and without mistake or regret, he gave his reply. Purport. The statement of the bull, the personality of religion, was full of philosophy and knowledge, and the king was satisfied since he could understand that the suffering bull was not an ordinary one. Unless one is perfectly conversant with the law of the Supreme Lord, one cannot speak such things touching philosophical truths. The emperor, being also on an equal level of sagacity, replied to the point without doubts or mistakes. Translation. Sutta Goswami said, O best among the Brahmanas, the Emperor Parikshit, thus hearing the personality of religion speak, was fully satisfied, and without mistake or regret, he gave his reply. So this is just the comment of Sutta Goswami in this conversation between the bull and the king. And previously we've seen how the bull very wisely analyzed the situation, and ultimately he concluded that it's very difficult to understand how this is all happening, in spite of the fact that we can get many philosophical answers for this question. And as Prabhupada remarks here in their purport, the bull was expressing great wisdom in his words, which indicates that he understood the teachings of the Lord. He understood how the Lord operated, and the emperor appreciated that. And the emperor was also on a very high level. He could appreciate the answer, and he could also reply suitably with great wisdom. So we see in this an example of a qualified speaker and a qualified listener. And when we have such a combination, then we get a very wonderful result. So we also talk about, we have a qualified guru and we have a qualified disciple, and then we get an exchange of knowledge. So where we want to get some good results in terms of knowledge, there has to be qualification of both parties. That's the very basic principle of the transmission of knowledge in the Vedas. And thus we have a system of parampara, where one person teaches another. The other person, of course, has to be qualified to accept that knowledge. That person becomes qualified with the knowledge, he teaches another person. But he doesn't select anyone with great wisdom, he selects a qualified person. And the qualified person can absorb the knowledge, then he passes it on to another person. So this is the way in which spiritual knowledge is transmitted from one person to another. It was, of course, you say physically also necessary to do that in ancient times because there were no books, there were no libraries. So how does knowledge get transmitted? Furthermore, the Vedas were considered to be only transmittable from one person to another. They were not to be publicly displayed anywhere. So it was also secret knowledge. So that is why we have this whole system of parampara, passing on, because it is in one sense secret, and at the same time previously there were no other methods of getting the transmission of knowledge except through a person. But the principle we understand is not just that it was, they were less scientifically advanced, so they didn't have internet, so therefore that's why they did it. That's not the reason. It's one circumstantial reason, but we could say that's at the same time, let's say, an assistant reason only. So the main reason is that knowledge is not just what is written in a book. We have the Vedas and they're there, but they have to be understood to be transmitted properly. If we just transmit knowledge and nobody understands what it means, it's useless. So the Vedic knowledge has to be understood by a person, that's the teacher or the guru, and then he can pass it on to the student. The same goes for mantra. If we want, we can look up all the secret mantras in Sanskrit books and we can figure out what they are, even though they're coded in the books also. They don't exactly give you the mantra straight out. They say this letter is this sound, this letter is this sound, like this. So it's a little bit of a puzzle to stick the mantra together, but nevertheless you can figure it out. So you could get all your secret mantras from books, but that's not the process. So that's why we have a Diksha Guru to pass on the Diksha mantras to the disciple. Because it should, the mantra itself has value or potency in being transmitted through a person who has some realization. And when there's no realization there, then it is not really the mantra anymore. So what's written in the book, the mantra is not actually the mantra. The mantra requires the Shakti of the person, and he delivers it to another. The same we can say about all Vedic literature. The Vedas themselves are just a bunch of syllables, but it requires a person too who has realization to deliver them. Then they have potency. Right. So this, of course, was a discussion in the 87th chapter of the Bhagavatam in the 10th canto, the prayers of the personified Vedas, a very philosophical chapter. It's one of those chapters which all the acharyas write huge commentaries on, that one and the prayers of Lord Brahma. These two chapters get a lot of commentary, besides the Rasalila chapter, so you get a lot of commentary. So the 87th chapter, particularly because of its philosophical content. But when each different Vedas pronounce different philosophies, etc. But the initial question is, how can the Vedas describe the Supreme Lord, or Brahman? Because Brahman is beyond words, and the Vedas are made up of words. So the Vedas themselves say that the Supreme Lord is beyond words and mind, etc. So how can we use material words to describe something which is non-material? That's the basic question. Of course, there's also another factor there, and that is the impersonal factor, that impersonal Brahman definitely cannot be described by anything because it hasn't got any qualities. So how do we describe that Brahman? We, of course, will say, yes, you can describe Brahman because Supreme Lord does have qualities, but they're spiritual qualities. But then the same problem comes, how can material words express spiritual qualities? and still remain intact as truth. So the ultimate answer is that, yes, the words of the Vedas look material, but they're not. And for any scripture, they're not material. They look like material sound, and they go in your ear like material sound, but they're not actually a material sound at all. Provided, of course, it comes to the proper source. So we say that the mantra is nishphala. It has no result. It's powerless unless it comes through the sampradaya, the mantra. So in other words, it has to come through a bona fide guru. Then your mantra has power. So similarly, the Vedic literature is also in all the words. They are spiritual, but unless they come through the proper person delivering it, the teacher, they don't have the power in them. So it's not just the word itself, it's the person who delivers it. It puts some of the, not to put it in, he reveals the Shakti of the particular sound, so it becomes spiritual. So therefore, though the Vedas are there and they're written down, and we have libraries full of Vedic literatures and manuscripts, etc., the real Veda is the Veda that is transmitted from one person to another with the proper meaning. Then it becomes valuable. So in answer to the question, can the Vedas represent something which is beyond words? Yes, because the Lord does have spiritual qualities, and the words of the Vedas are not material, they are spiritual. But then the rider on that is that it has to be delivered by the proper person, then it has that spiritual potency. It's just the book that we don't access it properly. Of course, in the modern world, time after time passed, and then Vedavyas decided that the Vedas were too difficult for people. Then he wrote the Puranas, because he wanted to open up the audience for the literature, spiritual literature. The Vedas were only open for the upper classes and not for the Sudras or the Mlecchas at all. They couldn't even hear a Veda or chant a Veda or chant even Om. It was forbidden to chant the word Om by a Sudra. So he couldn't learn the Vedas or hear the Vedas or understand the Vedas at all. And they're also very difficult to understand. So therefore, Vedavyasa wrote the Puranas and the Mahabharata with the Bhagavad Gita, so that it was not restricted anymore and less difficult to understand. Still, again, it's not that anyone can just take up the work and read it. We still need the authority of the teacher, the parampara system. So that's why Prabhupada emphasizes all the time, about parampara and sampradaya and Bhagavad Gita as it is, coming down in a line of authority rather than someone reinterpreting the Bhagavad Gita according to his own speculation. It's coming down in proper channel of realization from previous acharyas. And that way the words maintain their potency, spiritual potency. They don't become material words. So in this way scripture comes down, not just the Vedas, but the Puranas, and we say the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. And our Vaishnava mantras, which are given at Diksha, the same, they come down through parampara, and therefore they have their Shakti within them. That Shakti, therefore, is transmitted from devotee to devotee. It is the knowledge or the words with the Shakti in them, and they are transmitted from one person to another. So that is why we also emphasize the relationship between the guru and the disciple. The guru teaches, the disciple receives. In the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 4, which is titled Jnana Yoga. So in that chapter, which is not pure jnana, and it's not just impersonal jnana, it's also covers bhakti as well, but in talking about the transmission of knowledge, therefore in that context it says that to get knowledge or jnana, one has to approach one who has knowledge, the tattvavit. and not just philosophical knowledge, some realization also. And the person who approaches has to do with pranipat, which means surrender. Pat means, like patita means fallen, and nipat means to fall down, and pranipat means to fall down a lot. Prakrishta, prakrishta nipat, to fall down extremely, which means which means surrender. So that is the attitude of the disciple in front of the knower of knowledge, the guru, which is logical. We could say it's explainable by the fact that if one doesn't have knowledge, one should admit that and go to someone who has knowledge. If we go to someone without knowledge, we can't get knowledge. If we go to someone with knowledge, but we don't want knowledge, or we think we already got the knowledge, then we can't get knowledge also. We won't receive any knowledge. So we have to realize we have no knowledge, which means we have to put ourselves in an inferior position. So therefore we surrender. We fall down on the ground, so to speak, understanding that we are ignorant. So in that, with that attitude then, we can accept knowledge. Besides that qualification, we have pariprashna. Prashna means questioning. Pari means thorough questioning. So this does not mean that the disciple decides to interrogate the guru like an inquisitor, but rather he is inquisitive about spiritual life. So we see the ideal example in Rupa and Sanatan approaching Lord Chaitanya with grass in their mouths. They're doing their pranipat, and they say, "You please, we are ignorant, we don't know anything, you please deliver us, you please explain to us what is the purpose of life," etc. So the disciple has, the one who wants knowledge should desire the proper knowledge. If we go to a material person for some knowledge, then if we want to be a doctor, we have to go to a doctor. If we want to be a lawyer, we go to a lawyer. So if we want spiritual knowledge, then we have to go to someone who has spiritual knowledge. If we want to be a Vaishnava, then we have to go to a Vaishnava who has Vaishnava knowledge, to a devotee. So our pariprashna, or our inquisitive nature, is, how can I attain Krishna? How can I perform bhakti properly to get to Krishna? That's the question that should be asked by the disciple. That's his inquiry. So we shouldn't think that pariprashna, thorough questioning, means we can ask Guru about everything. How do I make my material life successful? How do I get a job? How do I get married? How do I have children? These are not the pariprashna questions. Thorough questioning does not mean thorough questioning on all your material matters. It means thorough questioning on only spiritual things. So that's the authority of the guru there. We're going to the guru for spiritual knowledge, then we ask spiritual questions, not material questions. So that is what the pariprashna is. Thorough questioning on the goal of life, etc. And the third aspect mentioned in that verse is seva, service, which of course can be the direct service, what we call the vapu seva, that the disciple should serve the physical needs of the guru in terms of cooking or whatever. And the other aspect, which is even more important, is the following the instructions. So not only we learn, but we have to enact, we have to do something. So the ultimate purpose of scripture and teaching, etc., is to do something. The whole purpose of the Vedas is to do something, to act. So the whole purpose of our knowledge in bhakti, sambandha gyan, is to do something. What is it? Perform devotional service. So we have to follow the orders of the Guru in terms of how to perform devotional service. So that's the seva that we do. We're following his order to perform devotional service. In the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2, the Vyavasatmika Buddhi verse is there. And then there's the commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And Prabhupada said, when I read that verse, then I understood that I had to go and preach in the West. So in that verse he talks about that Vyavasatmika Buddhi, which means very fixed intelligence, undeviating intelligence, or a will. And what is that will? That will is to follow the order of Guru. And so the Prabhupada said, therefore I followed Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's order, and I went to preach in the West. That was his order, so to speak. So in that commentary, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, what is that order? That order is like a medicine that you take, and if you don't take the medicine, you die. Like some people have diabetes, so they don't take their medicine, they die or whatever like that. So the order of Guru is like a life-sustaining medicine. You take it, you live. You don't take it, you die. So you follow the order, you're successful. You don't follow the order, you're spiritually dead. So that's what the order is. What is the actual order then? He says the order is, the order of Guru ultimately is to attain the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. That's the order of Guru. Somehow or other, that's what you have to attain. The whole purpose in surrendering to Guru is so that we can attain Radha and Krishna. Ultimate goal. So that's the order of the Guru ultimately. So all of the orders that we may have that are given by Guru should center around that rather than something else. How to develop our devotion to the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. So then that becomes our seva, our action. What is our action? Following the order of Guru is to do all these actions which will take us closer to Krishna. Okay. So in this way, the personality of the Guru is nothing separate from the Supreme Lord. It's actually simply we take his order in order that we can attain the lotus feet of Krishna. So Krishna becomes the center of all of our activities in order to attain that goal. So in this way, the Guru has to see if the disciple is got these characteristics: 1, pranipat; 2, pariprashna; and 3, seva. If he can do those things, then he becomes a qualified disciple. And then he can succeed. And the disciple, on the other hand, has to see that the Guru is qualified. What? In terms of tattva. In understanding the absolute truth. He has knowledge of the absolute truth. So we have the combination, then we get a good result. Qualified Guru, qualified disciple, then the disciple can progress very nicely. So, in other words, there's a hearing process that goes on between the Guru and disciple, based upon not just some book knowledge, but also upon the spiritual standing of the Guru. And that's where the potency of the word lies, of the scripture, through the potency of the Guru and his understanding and realization of the scripture. So in this way, the knowledge gets passed on. In the Nectar of Devotion, in the first part, the Rupa Goswami says this book looks a little bit difficult, but if you analyze it intellectually, yes, maybe you can understand it, but that's not the qualification for this understanding this book in truth. The real qualification is taste. If you have a taste for a bhakti, then you can understand all of this knowledge. If you don't have a taste for bhakti, it's all speculation, speculation. So therefore we have to understand through the process of bhakti So it is bhakti which energizes the scripture. It is with devotion that the guru accepts the scriptures and understands them. And it is with bhakti that he delivers it. And it is through bhakti that the disciple also accepts it. And then we get nice progress. Okay. Of course, the other qualification not mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita there, it just talks about pranipat, etc. But the other qualification for bhakti particularly is shraddha, or faith, which means that the not mental faith, but the soul, or the jiva, the atma, has to have evolved over many births so that he actually accepts internally the existence of the Supreme Lord. And consequently, when he hears the scriptures about the Lord, he naturally accepts them. He accepts with faith the words of the devotional scriptures. So that's the internal qualification of the devotee. So that is called the fertile field. The heart has faith, so that's like the field. And then the seed of bhakti is planted by Guru and Krishna. And once it is planted, then the devotee is the gardener who has to cultivate it. So it's not just the Guru gives you mantra, or the Guru gives you a name or a teaching or what, and that's it. That's just that's the seed only. Then the disciple has to be the gardener, and he has to nicely cultivate the garden. And if he doesn't do so, then we end up with a bunch of weeds coming up and irregular plants growing here and there, and we don't get a good result. So there is a great responsibility on the part of the disciple to be the proper gardener and cultivate the seed of bhakti. Yeah, okay, if it's done properly, then we get the proper result. So that is what we're looking for. We're looking for the result. The result we can't speculate on. We have to think of what the result is by going to the scripture, and there we get a clear idea what's the goal in life. And then we can't speculate on the process, so we get the process in the scripture also. That is the process of bhakti. How to do the bhakti, then with all sorts of details, then we may have to learn that through the guru. And by following properly, then we can cultivate properly, and then we can attain the goal. So therefore there is qualification there on the part of the disciple, and qualification there on the part of the guru. And if the both are qualified in the proper way, then we get a proper result. In this case we have Parikshit and Dharma speaking. In one sense they don't need anything because they're already perfect souls, but they're carrying out this conversation for our benefit. But even enlightened souls or perfect souls or nityasiddhas, they enjoy speaking and discussing about spiritual matters. So both of them were highly qualified, and therefore they were Parikshit was very impressed by the speaking of Dharma, and then he begins to speak also, and his words also will be full of knowledge. Okay.
So there's one verse, I can't remember the reference, but it mentions that a preacher or guru shouldn't give transcendental knowledge to unqualified persons. I think it's quoted, Guru Dhamma quotes it in his book Art of Learning. But I was thinking that Prabhupada came to the West, and if he was looking for unqualified people, people, that's probably where he'd find them, you know, like the hippies and intoxicationalists, that, you know, connections, etc. So what would be the most compelling reason Prabhupada was prepared to give knowledge, to give initiation to such?
Yeah. Well, as I said, the qualification for knowledge is not the external, a hippie or a non-hippie or a American or whatever. It's the shraddha, or the faith, that they have a willingness to accept what the scripture says, like the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am the source of everything. Aham sarva prabhu. Okay, we accept it. We're not going to say, okay, why we have to accept Krishna? Why not Shiva? Why not Jesus or whatever? Okay, Krishna says that, we accept it. So if people have that, they've actually advanced over many lifetimes. Now, externally, they may be a hippie or an American or a German or whatever, but that doesn't matter. The bhakti can sprout anywhere as long as the shraddha is there. So that's the qualification, the internal qualification, not their external appearance. So we could say maybe Krishna guided Srila Prabhupada to go to America because he found that he understood that there were some people with faith there, but it was kind of hidden. So then he had to pull out that faith, and when he had the faith, then he gave the instructions.
Also, you mentioned that the mantra only has potency if we receive it through the parampara.
Yeah, that's talking about the Diksha mantra.
Right, well, the Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna is a little different because even like Ajamil had potency, it destroyed his karma. It won't give the highest thing, prema, but at least it gives something. But the mantras are more particular. They give very little without coming through the Shakti of the Guru.
So Diksha mantra means like Brahman mantra.
Well, the other mantras. The Brahman mantra is a separate one. That's the Brahma Gayatri. That's for Vedas. That's more particular still. So that's given to the Vaishya Kshatriyas Brahmanas for studying the Vedas, basically. And our Vaishnava mantras are for realizing Krishna, prema, just like Hare Krishna, but a little more restricted because they're only given to people with higher qualification, etc. And they're secret, and you can't do kirtan with them, etc.
So Hanuman Tamani mentions that in Bhagavad chanting Hare Krishna,
useless.
they get no benefit. So it seems that even though the Hare Krishna mantra is independent, it seems Krishna can choose whether he's there or not.
Well, yeah. In the case of the Mayavadis, why it's useless is because they're offensive. It's aparadi. If you're neutral, like in the case of Ajamil, he didn't believe in Krishna, he did not disbelieve in him, he didn't think he had a form, he didn't think anything, he just chanted accidentally, then it has effect. If you're thinking, that Supreme Brahman has no form, Krishna's got a material form, then it's aparad. So then that's why no effect. Yeah? So Ajamil had no aparad, therefore it had that effect of destroying all of his karmas.
So, Maharaj, you were talking extensively about the benefit of receiving knowledge in disciplic succession and how if you don't receive in disciplic succession, it's not effective.
Yeah.
And that really kind of, I guess, lays waste to things like the translations of Max Mueller, etc. like that. They're completely useless. At least spiritually.
Spiritually. You can get some material knowledge out of it, maybe the words and the certain concepts, but the actual spiritual intent is missing. Yeah.
Well, it had quite a material effect, didn't they? They culture in India. But my question in relation to that, is like there's many books out there, so-called spiritual books, which haven't been, the knowledge hasn't come in disciplic succession, at least not in our body of Vaishnava succession. And then we see the devotees are taking those books and bringing that knowledge into ISKCON and trying to introduce such knowledge into ISKCON. What's your comments on that?
It would depend on what it is, if it's offensive or not offensive. In other words, people can approach spiritual knowledge in a very general way, just like we have Atma Gyan. And we understand I'm not the body, I'm something here as Atma, which is eternal and full of knowledge, and it's like light and it's very peaceful. So that's Atma Gyan. So some people may appreciate that. So we don't say there's anything wrong with it, because Bhagavad Gita also presents that as one step. The Jnana Yoga is Atma Gyan, leading to Bhakti. So it's one step towards it. It's not necessary, but it's one way of getting it to it. So we do Nishkama Karma Yoga, then we do Jnana Yoga with Atma, then we can go to Bhakti. So there's nothing wrong with that, but of course people can speculate like anything about it also. When they start speculating too much, then that's where it gets very dangerous. And they have all sorts of weird ideas about what it is, and that's the final goal. If they cut it off there, that's the final goal. That's like, then it becomes impersonalism. So if it's done properly, then it can add, but it's only, we understand it's not the final conclusion. It's only one step leading towards bhakti and appreciation of Krishna.
So isn't that one of the problems with introducing knowledge from, say, other sampradayas, for instance? They have a different conclusion.
Yeah. We have to be very careful how we do that. We can understand some things, and therefore acharyas do quote from Madhva or Sri Sampradaya or whatever, but very particular with what part they're quoting, because some things we don't agree with, the details we don't agree with. If they say that Vishnu is supreme and Krishna is an avatar, then we don't accept that. So they never quote that part. But they'll quote the part about, the jiva is the servant of the Supreme Lord, or that the jiva has some similarity to the Lord, but he's not exactly like the Lord. So certain things they'll take from there to support, but other things they won't quote.
So then based on what you're saying there, from that I would conclude that it seems that in order to introduce things from other sampradayas and other types of knowledge, you really need to be at the level of the acharya.
Yeah, or very, very selective, definitely. You have to be selective.
You need a very deep understanding.
Yeah. If you know the conclusions, the Gaudiya conclusions first, then we can see what we can select from that to assist our knowledge or whatever like that if we have some question.
Yeah. And then the other question I have is it's in a similar vein. You talk about mantras, how the mantras receive potency when you get them from a qualified person.
Yeah.
So what about all these other types of gayatris and things that are used in deity worship sometimes, like Lakshmi, Gayatri, or Sri Gayatri, and Shinga Gayatri, and this thing and that thing?
Yeah.
What's the benefit of that?
Since we don't get them through the guru or whatever.
Yeah, just get them from a book.
Yeah. So I suppose it's our main shelter is our own Vaishnava mantras and Hare Krishna. So in that sense, if we use them, that they get energized by that. I suppose that's the only benefit. Though technically, if you're going to worship other deities, mainly you go through the guru because you worship those deities.
Yeah.
So if we go on our sampradaya, then we worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Radha and Krishna. That's what we're supposed to be worshipping.
Yeah.
So we start worshipping all these other things, and that's more or less real secondary.
Yeah.
If you want to worship those, you go to that sampradaya and get those mantras from some guru instead.
It seems like if you look at the deities that Srila Prabhupada gave us, following from his guru, Gauritai, Radha Krishna, Jagannatha, Subhadra, then when we get Gayatri Diksha, we get the mantras. But other deities, we don't get the mantras, so I can't see the point.
Yeah, so very secondary. Of course, we find maybe for preaching we get the Ram deity in Bombay or something like that, but very secondary.
But you could still worship Ram with Gopal mantra and Kama.
I suppose you could, but of course that is a little bit of a rasabhasa. That's because the mood is different. Yeah.
Thank you.
For the class, Maharaj, I was wondering, you're mentioning that one should have qualifications, so the qualification is internal, and one should be an expert gardener. So not everyone has direct access to the spiritual master, so we need to be in the association of other gardeners. But would you say that everyone should get at least to have one person at least that they can confide in? Because these days, when you humble yourself, when you put yourself in a subservient position, someone wants to take advantage of you or put you down or use that against you. But in devotional life, it seems that it is essential to have someone who can guide us and who can even chastise and correct us, and we are willing to take that, not like we have like a family or group of devotees and everyone's a kind of thing who has the same opinion, and you just keep going on the same direction and not even changing. So it seems like we need to have some authority or someone who can also correct us and chastise us and be willing to take that.
Well, we have the two things. We have the Diksha Guru and we have Shiksha Guru. And you take one Diksha Guru, but you can have many Shiksha Gurus. So then if you don't have association with the Diksha Guru, then you could have the association of Shiksha Gurus, which could be one or many as well. And in fact, what happens is that in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, though we still continue the process of Diksha, etc., the most prominent sadhana is Harinam, which doesn't require Diksha. So it's not the mantra in the normal sense of something secret which is passed on and then it loses its potency if it's publicly pronounced. In fact, it gives more powerful when it's publicly pronounced. So it's quite a unique feature in our Sampradaya that we have Harinam as the main process. So the emphasis therefore is less on the Diksha Guru, whose function is actually to transmit the Diksha mantra, because we're using that to a lesser degree, mainly it's for the deity worship. But the deity worship also is secondary to the Harinam. So therefore when Harinam becomes prominent, we can say that theoretically, the Shiksha Guru should become more prominent than the Diksha Guru. It hasn't so far in ISKCON, but anyway, theoretically, the Shiksha Guru should become more prominent. As we see with when Bhaktisiddhanta traces our line, he traces it through Shiksha, not through Diksha. So theoretically, that should be the process, so that we put prominence on the persons who give the teachings, proper teachings, rather than simply the Diksha mantra.
Maharaj, I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit about the material questions that the Guru can make, that the disciple can make.
Well, preferably not. You shouldn't answer. In other words, we shouldn't expect the Guru to be some sort of authority on your material affairs of your household, especially if he's a sannyasi. In fact, he's completely ignorant of that. And if he's going to give you an answer in household affairs, probably it's going to be the opposite of what actually is the right answer. So, as I said, you go to Guru for spiritual questions and getting spiritual guidance, not for getting material guidance. And we shouldn't expect the Guru to have all material knowledge of everything about what your job should be and who you should marry and how many children you should have, etc., etc. You can maybe give some general direction, like, okay, after 50 years you renounce or something, become a vanaprastha, like that. But as far as the details of all material knowledge, no. Why we should expect that of the Guru? We're not going to the Guru for material things, we're going for spiritual advancement. So that's the questions we should ask, and the other things we can ask somebody else. It also, of course, puts a burden on the Guru, because if he's expected to answer all these questions and he really doesn't know how to answer them, then he may give you a wrong answer, and then you blame the Guru for that, when it wasn't his qualification to answer anyway. So better we don't ask those questions.
Hare Krishna. Does the Shiksha Guru, do you have to formally say, "Oh, my Shiksha Guru"?
What's that? Do you have to formally announce your Shiksha Guru? He's my Shiksha Guru. No.
Can it just be in the heart?
No, it's very flexible, very flexible. Even the Diksha Guru is supposed to be in the heart, more or less. You don't advertise your Diksha Guru around the world also, because it's actually the internal respect that we have for a person that counts more than publicizing it to anybody. So again, the Shiksha can be like that, internal acceptance, and understand his teachings and accept the guidance that he gives spiritually.
Wondering about this principle of reciprocal succession and receiving knowledge, especially in regards to current times where we have books and
Internet.
And also it's not very common for a spiritual master to be in one place long enough to fully train or educate a disciple.
Yeah.
It's not really the culture we cultivated more. It's culture,
Yeah.
depending on Prabhupada's books, as the primary perception.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay, or would it be better to sit down with your spiritual master and read all the books with them?
Well, it would depend on the individual disciple and his particular needs. If he requires that, then better not take the Diksha Guru who's not ever going to see you but once every 5 years or whatever. Or give you a notice on the internet, something like that. If you require something more than that from your Diksha Guru, then fine, then you have to look for a different person. Otherwise, the other thing is the shiksha. Rather than depend on the Diksha Guru, you take shiksha from persons, and then you could probably find a person who's more willing to give individual teachings, etc.
It seems quite rare to have a teacher who actually is available to educate you with the entire Vaishnava Siddhanta, like in one,
sitting next to you all the time.
Educational experience. Maybe Champati.
Yeah, if you go to one of these academies or something, they give you a 4-year course in all the Sandarbhas and this and that in Vrindavan. There's one course like that, and they go through all Prabhupada's books, and they go through the Sandarbhas, and they go through all the commentaries. That's a 4-year course, so that's possible there. Otherwise, the other is that you do on your own, and then you consult somebody, and then if there's not personally available, at least you have communications on the internet or something.
Just a comment, if I may, furthering on that point you're just making about the idea of receiving knowledge from the Siksha and the importance of Siksha. There's a really interesting conversation with Srila Prabhupada. Those are asking about the relationship with Diksha Siksha. And then Srila Prabhupada, he said the Diksha Guru is like going to university and then you go and register.
Yeah.
He said that's Diksha. It's like you pay money and you register to become a student. He said the real thing is the Siksha, the transmission of knowledge. He said the Diksha is just a formality. But in ISKCON we find often that the Diksha Guru is the most prominent Siksha Guru.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the case. It doesn't have to be the case. So
Yeah.
because we take Diksha, then we become dependent upon that person to be the only source of knowledge.
Yeah.
I think we're really holding ourselves back.
In other words, we merge everything into the Diksha Guru, when it could be separate.
But there's so many qualified Vaishnavas in ISKCON who can give us transcendental knowledge. We just have to...
Yeah. If you have the desire and you seek it out, then you can get it. Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna.